And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Folks, one of my favorite themes is that of city building. And even though there's some great city building games out there like Suburbia, that doesn't mean I don't want to play more of them. So I was very interested in playing Small City. This is a very ironic box cover because it says Small City in this very big box, which incidentally is oversized for what is inside the game. But that's besides the point. This is a game, it has a little 3 on it because it's the third in a series of building games from this designer slash company. City building, lots of different things. There's a ton, all sorts of cool buildings to build. Is it thematic? Is it fun? Let's find out. Now, I'm not going to go over every rule in the game because there's a lot of them. I just want to give you a basic idea of how the game works. You're going to start with your own board here, and you're going to be building a city, and you'll be adding different buildings to the city as time goes by. And there's different types of buildings: residential, commercial, industrial, etc. You'll start with one building with some workers on it. You'll start with this here. This disc here is to show you what size you can build, and different actions and things will let you increase that and increase the size of the area that you can build in. Over here you have 2 discs which percentage-wise keep, this is 13% pollution. So that keeps track of your pollution. So this is your main board. The first things that players will do on a round is they'll pick the special action. So one player can say, I'm going to take the architect special action. The next player can take the mediator action or the mayor action, or they can pay 1 to take one of these 2 actions, or 2 to take this action, or 3. So maybe they pay 1 and they take the supporter. Then the next player has to go next to them. And if they wanted to go here, they would just pay 1 to go there because you don't count the ones that people are on. So what this does is usually special actions gives you a minor ability. For example, the mayor lets you go first next round. The urban planner lets you increase the size of your area, like I showed you before, that you can build in. The city councilor lets you move on the main board. The opponent does nothing for you. So if I build next to the opponent, you don't want to go there because that's worthless. You'll have to take urban planner or pay to take something else. So this is kind of an interesting way to choose the special action card that you have, and it's the first thing that's done each round. Players are then going to build simultaneously. You're going to put a shield so people don't see what you're building, but there's all sorts of restrictions and types of things that you are building next to. There's also cost for some buildings. To build cultural buildings, you're going to need different types of resources. These buildings, you can build one residential for free, but if you want to build another residential, it needs to be next to the cultural buildings. If you want to build these, they need to be next to residential buildings. And there's different, I'm not going to go into all of them, but there's different requirements for the different buildings, and there's also the cost to place these buildings out on the board. So it's much easier to place small ones, and there's also ways to upgrade them, and there's some very specific ones. Each player also have some special, like a wharf tile and a factory tile, and these are going to be needed to put out because they're going to power other tokens, and you have to put them in various positions. Some of the spots that you put out are going to be able to store, like you can see here, your one that you start with can store people or can store resources. As you get different resources from the building, they'll be stored there. Others have spots for people, where when you have different people that go there, they will produce resources for you, or you can sell resources, or you can get money. The different buildings provide different things. Residential buildings are mostly there for victory points and such. Again, like I said, there's different kinds of buildings. The industrial buildings produce resources, commercial ones bring in money, residential ones, and then there's parks, which help fight pollution. And I'm not saying that I'm placing any of these correctly, I'm just showing an example of what they are. So all the players are going to be building at the same time and upgrading at the same time. And like I said, there is a lot of rules in the book as to how each of these buildings is done, and where they can be placed and what they can be put next to. Players are also going to be able to then move their citizens to different buildings, but you also have the opportunity to move your citizens maybe to someone else's city. Maybe I want to go there and get that resource. And you can put your citizens in different people's cities. You can't put too many, a maximum of 1 in each opponent's thing unless you build a metro station, in which case you can have 2 people in other spots. And tourists will move around. You can't leave them in the same building. And then those tourists, if I have a tourist in my city, is going to produce 1 for me, but everyone else is going to get money. If I'm over here, I'll get things. And so players are going to get different income and resources depending on where everything is. This is the center board, which shows how many rounds are in the game, shows what you do in each round, and also has players able to move discs here, which will give them different benefits. You can pay to move over here or spend points to get over here. Votes are basically what points are, and each round you're going to get votes based on citizens that you have in residences. Residences don't produce you money or resources, but this is where they will get you votes, where you get points. Then the amount of citizens that are in your thing are going to produce pollution for you, and it's possible that some of your people will die. And then you're going to influence the city council. This is here where you're going to move these discs around and get different bonuses. Then the mayor is going to change, and you'll go on and forth. This is the basic game. The advanced game adds some other setup things, some extra cards, and there's also bonus cards in both games where you're trying to get different things accomplished, and if you pull these off, you are going to get points. Like if I fill the 7x7 grid here, I'll get 12 points, but if you take one of these cards and don't do it, you will also lose points. Now, I apologize for this kind of brief overview of the game. I just don't want to, people will say, oh, you missed a rule here or there. Well, yeah, I missed a lot of rules. I'm just trying to give you an overall feel that each turn you're going to pick a roll card, which will give you a benefit. You'll then get to build in your city following different restrictions and rules using money and resources. You'll then move your citizens around, collecting those money and resources. Then you will get points or votes. You will produce pollution. You'll influence this board and keep track, and then go to the next round. Whew. There is a lot to go over here. First of all, the pieces for the game I think are fine, with the exception of the iconography. I can never remember what anything does. I looked in that rule book so many times. Each of these, there's the different cultural buildings. Each gives you a benefit, but the icons on the building, I'm like, what does 2 suitcases mean? Oh, that means I can send 2 people out. It was just constantly confusing. Some of them even have icons. And so there was this constant, what does this do? What does that do? What does that do? Thing. But I did like the little meeple guys. I liked the people. I thought the colors were bright. The whole thing looks good when it's laid out. I like the artwork. That's good. It's way too big, the box at least, for the stuff that comes in the game, but all that's fine. Stacking all the tiles at the beginning of the game, forget that. I'm just putting them in piles. Now, the picking of the roll at the beginning, I liked it a lot because that's a really nice mechanism. I pick, you just randomly shuffle and put out 8 of them. I pick one, then you have to pick one next to that or pay money. It's a little bit rondolish, and that's pretty neat. I'm less impressed with what's available. I mean, some of them are good. Mayor, go first. Other one, -1 cost to put out buildings. Those are good. Some of the other ones are merely okay, and I think it's the point of it. But for how long it takes to set those up, pick the rolls, everyone sits there, thinks, it's a cool thing, but it has such minor influence on the game that I liked it, but it almost felt like it was thrown in. Then, speaking of the mayor, and I didn't mention this, there's a very much take that issue. Whoever has the mayor gets to go first. That's a big deal. But also, everyone else can basically take a mayor meeple or a piece and just basically stick it on their board and say, you can't build there this turn. Just totally messing over the other player. That player, whoever has the mayor. That's okay, but it's so random. It's one of those basically, hey, are you in first? Well, not any longer. I just felt that was kind of, The pollution, I like the idea of pollution. I like moving the citizens. I like sending my citizens to work in other people's things. That was something I thought was enjoyable about the game. It was interesting sending people around, sending people over there. If someone's in my city and there's too much pollution, I have to kill someone, I might kill your visitor who's come over. I found stuff like that interesting, and there was some back and forth that I would build a good building to get people into my city. I did find it difficult, the building phase in general. There are so many restrictions and things, and I can't build this here. And it's not so much just the restrictions and trying to remember them. Okay, this building needs to be next to this. I mean, some of it's thematic, but it's still kind of, I was constantly answering. Someone said, wait a minute, I want to build this. No, you can't build that because it doesn't meet these requirements. And then putting it in, it was so puzzly, and it didn't feel like the city was growing organically. It felt like I was doing a puzzle rather than doing the city. And following that, the building phase offered some major AP, analysis paralysis moments in the game. And yes, at least they allow you to build simultaneously, but there's always going to be one player who sits there and goes, and they're waiting and they're taking, you're like, I'm done, come on. But it really is stinky, and I can't even blame those players because there's so much going on. You have so many options, and there are some buildings and some of those goal cards that require a very specific setup, and if you don't start it correctly, you're never going to finish it correctly, and that was such a huge part of the game. It's kind of fun to build things, but this game made it work to build the buildings rather than entertaining and just watching it organically and seeing what happens. And then the buildings, when you built them, getting more people to your city was something you had to just struggle and grasp for. This game was never one like, ooh, I get some resources, I get this. No, it was struggling and grasping. And so I think some people may like that, but it is not for me. Now, I do like the politician chart. I like getting the special abilities. I like trading things in for those. Unfortunately, by that time, you're like, oh, all this work for the city, and you're fighting off pollution. Overall, I did not like the game much at all, even though I thought several of the ideas in the game were both clever and fun, because the building and how difficult it was and the prerequisites that were needed and the slowness that some people took on it, and that plus the added stress of the pollution going on, plus the added stress of, okay, which of these things I'm going to take and getting votes. The whole thing was just huge and overwrought. And I think that there's a really good game here, but it's one of those times where I think a little bit less might have been more. Like that beginning part, you pick a guy, that's a great idea, it's a great mechanism, but does it belong in this game? If it did, why not make those guys cooler and more interesting? The building, why not cut maybe a couple of the buildings out or make it just a little bit easier to place them? Now, I know that this game is trying to offer a more deeper experience than games like Suburbia and stuff, but at the same time, Suburbia gives me the idea of building a city and seeing it grow, and I don't have to think as hard while doing it. And some people may want a very heavy mental challenge, but I don't think this game's ratio of fun to the amount of effort you have to put into it. I don't want to have to do spreadsheets and stuff. Yeah, I guess planning a city is a lot of work. I'm not going to argue that. But I want some fun beyond that. And I thought while some things, moving people in other people's cities and getting some resources and finally being able to build a building you want was so hard to get that once you got it, I was like, yes! But that just did not offset how difficult and overwrought the game was for me. So for me, this one's a pass, unfortunately. That's Small City. Dice Tower Judgment, too much work, not enough fun.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.
Out the door!